The first snow of winter came early that year, uninvited and cruel. It fell in thick, wet flakes that clung to the rooftops of the quiet village nestled between the hills and woods, where time moved slowly and no one was ever in a hurry. The birch trees stood bare and brittle, like forgotten brushstrokes against the gray sky. Smoke curled from chimneys, and shutters rattled with every gust of wind that swept down the narrow streets. Elias sat alone in his weathered wooden cottage, at the edge of the village near the woods. The house creaked with age, much like its owner. He was a man of few words and even fewer visitors. His once steady hands, those that had painted sunrises and sorrow with equal grace, trembled now as he fed the fire, the flames casting soft shadows across a room full of half-finished canvases and unopened letters. He was a painter once famous enough to be remembered, but not enough to be bothered. His wife, Anna, had passed away nearly a decade ago. Since then the world had shrunk, for Elias growing quieter each season. The house had become a museum of her memory. Her favorite mug still sat near the kitchen sink. Her scarf hung on the hook by the door, and the chair she once read in remained untouched. Elias had tried to paint her again and again, but the lines never felt right. So he painted other things instead: lonely trees, empty boats, silent windows, each one echoing his grief. That morning, the snow was relentless. Elias was preparing tea, moving slow but deliberate, when he heard the sound. A faint scratching barely audible over the howl of the wind. At first, he thought it might be the wind itself, or perhaps the weight of snow shifting on the roof. But then it came again, a soft, desperate scraping. He opened the door. A blast of cold air rushed in, stinging his eyes and cutting through his layers. There, just beyond the step, stood a fox. Not a pup, not a wild blur darting through the woods, but an adult, ragged and trembling, her fur wet and clinging to her thin frame. She had a limp in one hind leg and a milky scar where one eye should have been. Her remaining eye golden and alert locked onto Elias's face. They stood like that for a long moment, old man and wounded fox, watching each other, the wind howling. Between them, like a conversation, neither of them could speak aloud. Strange thing, Elias murmured, more to himself than to her. What brings you here? The fox made no sound, made no move to run. Her breaths came in short, visible puffs. The snow collected around her paws, and her body swayed slightly with exhaustion. Elias stepped aside. "Come in, if you're coming," he said simply, and she did. She walked past him, each step slow and deliberate, her paws barely making a sound on the wooden floor. She stopped near the hearth, curled her tail around her body, and lay down as if she had always lived there. Elias shut the door behind them and stood in silence, looking at her. The firelight danced across her fur, bringing out glints of auburn and silver. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. He took an old towel and approached her slowly, cautiously. The fox didn't flinch. Gently he dried her fur, careful not to touch the swollen leg. When he was done, he placed a shallow bowl of water nearby and some scraps of leftover chicken from the night before. The fox drank, ate a little, then rested her head on her paws. "Well," Elias sighed, lowering himself into the chair across from her, "that's the most company I've had in years." The wind howled again, but inside the little cottage there was a new warmth, quiet but unmistakable. Elias watched the fox for a long time, his tea forgotten, the fire crackling gently between them. There was something in the way she had looked at him, something more than fear or instinct. It was not trust, not yet. But it was not nothing. He thought of Anna then, of how she had loved animals. She used to feed strays in the alley behind their first apartment, leaving bits of bread and bowls of milk that always disappeared before dawn. She would have knelt beside the fox without hesitation, whispering soft things in a voice made to soothe. "You'd have liked her," Elias said aloud. "Bold little thing." The fox flicked her ear at the sound of his voice but did not move. He stared at her, and something in his chest, something rusted shut, shifted slightly. He didn't recognize it at first. It had been too long since he'd felt anything warm that didn't come from the fire. Maybe it was the loneliness cracking, or the quiet presence of another soul in the room, but it was there, A small, uncertain flicker. I should give you a name, he said after a while. Can't keep calling you Fox, he thought. For a moment. Kira, he said finally. That sounds right. Anna used to read a book with a girl named Kira, brave, quiet. Just like you. The fox didn't stir, but her one golden eye remained open, watching him, listening. Elias lit an extra candle and left the fire burning longer than usual. Kira slept by the hearth, her body still, but her ears twitching at every groan of the wind outside. Elias sat by the window and looked out at the snow-covered hill behind his house. The birch tree at the top stood like a sentinel, guarding memories long buried. He thought he saw a leaf fall, though the branches had been bare for weeks. For the first time in years, he wasn't entirely alone. Winter settled over the village like a heavy quilt, cold and unmoving. Days passed with the same soft silence, snow blanketing the trees, smoke rising from chimneys, the world wrapped in stillness. But inside Elias's little cottage, something had begun to stir. Kira stayed. What Elias assumed would be a brief visit, a moment of refuge for a wounded animal, slowly turned into something else entirely. She made no move to leave, and Elias never asked her to. Each day she rose with the sun and curled beside the hearth, her tail flicking lazily in her sleep. At night she lay at the foot of his bed, not quite touching, but close enough for Elias to hear the rhythmic sound of her breathing, steady, alive. Grounding, they moved around each other like two ghosts learning to live again. Elias had not spoken this much aloud in years. Not to people, certainly. But with Kira he spoke freely, not expecting replies, not needing them. His voice, rough and cracked from years of disuse, softened as the weeks passed. "You're quieter than Anna ever was," he said one morning, spooning porridge into two mismatched bowls, one for himself, one gently set near the hearth for Kira. She'd talk about everything. The birds, the sky, the smell of the rain. I used to tease her that she could speak to flowers. Kira didn't look up from her bowl, but her ear twitched slightly. "She would have loved you," said you have a poet's eyes. That day Elias brought out his brushes again. They had sat in a jar of turpentine for nearly 3 winters untouched. His fingers still trembled, the strokes came slowly, but he felt something different this time. Not urgency, not brilliance, but peace. He didn't paint for the world anymore. He painted for the warmth on the floor by the fire. He painted for the stillness. Kira began to appear in his work. At first, only her tail, curled elegantly around a rock in a winter scene. Then her full figure, watching from the corner of a canvas, a single golden eye rendered with aching care. Sometimes she stood beside a tree. Other times, on the porch, looking out at the world with quiet dignity. Elias painted her because she was real. And she was present. And that meant something in a life that had been shrinking since Anna's death. She followed him, not like a dog, not obedient or eager, but loyal in her own silent way. When he walked to the edge of the woods to gather pine cones or cut firewood, she would appear a few steps behind. When he trudged to the village market for flour and oil, she trailed him from a distance, weaving through alleyways and hedges, always out of sight from the townsfolk. They noticed, of course. Whispers followed Elias through the market stalls, like fallen leaves. "The fox follows him like a shadow," one woman said. Strange thing. A wild animal keeping company with an old hermit. Children watched in awe, hoping to catch a glimpse of her golden eye through the mist, but Elias never acknowledged the talk. He didn't need to. He'd never cared for their curiosity before, and he certainly didn't now. Let them whisper. One evening, as snow fell softly against the windows, Elias sat in his rocking chair by the fire. Kira lay at his feet, her breath slow, her body rising and falling with each exhale. Outside, the birch trees stood still and white, their skeletal branches reaching skyward like aching hands. "I dreamt of Anna last night," Elias said, staring into the flames. She was laughing. The real kind, head back, eyes squinting. All teeth. Haven't heard that sound in so long. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "She was painting with me. Told me I was holding the brush too tightly. Told me to let the color breathe." He paused. "When she died, everything stopped." Not just her, you understand everything. I thought maybe I did too, just slower. Kira lifted her head slightly. Her eye met his for a long moment, unblinking, but Elias's voice caught in his throat. You've been good company. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The warmth of the fire and the quiet presence of Kira said everything the silence couldn't. That night, he dreamed again, not of Anna this time, but of a fox running through tall grass beneath a golden sky. Free and unbroken, when he awoke, the house was cold, but his chest felt lighter. Winter began to loosen its grip by late February. The snow melted from the rooftops and birds returned to the bare branches. But the bond between man and fox, forged in the quiet of winter, remained unchanged. They were still two broken souls. But now, at least they were broken together, and sometimes Elias thought that was enough. Spring arrived, not with trumpets and blossoms, but with a slow, uncertain thaw. The snow receded from the village like a tide, leaving behind patches of brown grass and muddy trails. Birds began to return to the birch trees. The days grew longer, the light softer. Inside the cottage at the edge of the woods, time was moving differently. Elias felt it in his bones. His steps had grown smaller. He no longer rose at dawn, and the walk to the market became a weekly struggle, rather than a morning routine. The cane he had once used only on long hikes now rarely left his hand. He wheezed climbing the porch stairs, and sometimes his heart beat strangely in his chest, fluttering like a trapped bird. Unsure where to go, but still he painted slowly, gently, one brushstroke at a time. Most days Kira would sit nearby, her tail wrapped neatly around her paws, watching him. The light from the window often caught her fur just so, turning it into rivers of rust and silver. Kira had aged too. Her steps had lost their soundless grace. Her injured legs stiffened in the mornings, and sometimes she would pause halfway across the room, resting before moving on. The golden eye remained bright, but even that had dulled at the edges. Like a coin worn smooth by time, Elias didn't speak of it, but he saw it clearly. The way her breathing slowed when she slept, how she no longer chased birds in the garden, how her ears flicked more out of habit than curiosity. They were mirrors now, both winding down, gently fading. One warm afternoon in early summer, Elias tried to climb the hill behind the cottage. It had been years since he last stood beneath the birch tree at the top. It was where he had proposed to Anna, where they had once shared tea on a threadbare blanket, watching clouds drift across the sky, where he had painted his first landscape with her beside him, laughing when he got more paint on his shirt than the canvas. That hill had once felt like a friend. Now, it felt like a mountain. He took slow, dragging steps through the tall grass. His breath came in short bursts. Halfway up, his legs buckled, and he crumpled to the earth with a quiet grunt. His cane fell beside him. Kira had followed, as always, this time closer, more watchful. When Elias fell, she stood beside him, her paw brushing against his arm, her head low. "I'm all right," he whispered, though his voice was thin and tired. "Just a little older than I remember." He lay there for a long while, watching the clouds roll across the sky. Kira sat next to him in the tall grass, silent and still. The wind rustled the birch leaves far above them. Eventually Elias laughed. Not because something was funny, but because it all felt so absurd. "I used to run up this hill," he said. "Used to race Anna to the top. She always won." Kira blinked slowly, as if she remembered too. They didn't make it to the top that day. Elias stood with effort, leaning heavily on his cane in Kira's presence, and they made their slow way back to the house. That night, Elias pulled out a fresh canvas. If he couldn't visit the tree, he would bring it to life in paint. Over the following weeks, Elias painted the birch tree every day from memory, from different angles, under different skies. In every version, the tree stood alone at the top of the hill, its white bark peeling like old paper. Sometimes the leaves were green and full, other times red and gold, catching the light of autumn sunsets. But in every single painting, one detail remained the same. A single golden leaf clung to the highest branch, trembling against the wind. That leaf became a symbol, a whisper, a question he wasn't ready to answer. One morning, Elias woke to find Kira still lying near the fire, unmoving. For a moment, his heart stopped. But then she stirred, slowly, painfully. Her breathing was shallow, her ribs rising like waves in slow motion. Elias sat beside her on the rug. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He reached out a hand and rested it on her side. Her eye met his, not pleading, not afraid, just tired. "Stay as long as you need to," he whispered. Outside, summer quietly gave way to the first signs of fall. The mornings were colder. The trees, once full and green, began to wear gold and crimson like fading crowns. And Elias kept painting. The last canvas he worked on was different. It showed the birch tree in full autumn, the sky behind it a smoky purple. At the base of the tree sat a fox with one golden eye, her head turned upward, watching the lone leaf still clinging to the branch. Elias never finished it. One day, he simply set down the brush and didn't pick it up again. He didn't say goodbye to Kira, not in words. They had never needed those. Instead, he sat with her in silence, their breaths rising and falling in uneven harmony. Two old hearts nearing their final page. He knew the goodbye was coming. He felt it with each soft gust of wind, but still, he was grateful for every extra moment, even the slow ones, even the sad ones, because in her company, Elias had remembered what it was to feel. The morning came quietly, as if afraid to disturb the old man's sleep. Outside, the sky was a soft watercolor, pale orange bleeding into lavender, with low-hanging clouds drifting like forgotten dreams. A cool breeze slipped through the cracked window, carrying the scent of damp earth and birch leaves. The first true signs of autumn had arrived overnight. Inside the little wooden house, the fire had burned down to embers. Elias lay in bed, cocooned beneath his wool blanket. His breath came slowly now, spaced between long pauses that stretched too long to be comfortable. His skin was pale, almost translucent in the thin morning light, but his face was calm, peaceful. Kira rested beside him. She had climbed onto the bed in the early hours of the morning, something she had never done before, not even on the coldest nights. Now, her body curled gently against his side, her head resting on his chest. Each rise and fall of his breath moved her ever so slightly, as if reminding her he was still there. Elias stirred, his eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. The light hurt, but only for a moment. He turned his head toward Kira and gave her the faintest smile, not of joy, not of pain, but of something older and deeper. Recognition. He reached a trembling hand and let it rest atop her fur. She didn't move, but her tail flicked once, a soft gesture. "You stayed," Elias whispered. Barely audible, Kira blinked slowly. "I suppose it's time," he said, not to her, not really, more to himself, or to the air, or maybe even to Anna, wherever she might be. His hand slipped away, falling softly onto the quilt. His eyes wandered to the window. Outside, a golden birch leaf floated down from the sky, carried gently by the breeze. He watched it, or maybe he only imagined it, as it drifted and danced in the air, weightless and free. "Beautiful," he whispered. His final word. A breath later, his chest rose one last time. Then it fell and didn't rise again. The room was very still. No ticking clock, no stirring breeze, no sound at all except the faint crackle of cooling embers. Kira didn't move. She remained curled against him, her eye open but unfocused. The warmth between them began to fade, but she stayed. She stayed for minutes, then an hour, then longer. When the sun finally cleared the trees and touched the edge of the bed, Kira shifted slightly, and then she too grew still. Her last breath was barely a whisper. The villagers found them that afternoon. Mr. Alwyn, the baker, had grown worried when Elias didn't arrive for bread, as he always did on Wednesdays. He walked up the path, calling softly through the mist. The door was unlocked. The fire had gone out. He stepped inside and stopped in the doorway. Elias lay on the bed, a faint smile frozen on his lips. Curled beside him, Kira's body pressed close, as if still protecting him. The stillness of the room felt sacred, untouchable. Alwyn removed his cap and stood in silence. Word spread through the village like wind through wheat. One by one, neighbors came with quiet steps and lowered eyes. No one touched anything. No one said much. Some cried. Some smiled through tears. The painter had gone. And the fox who never left his side had followed. They buried Elias 2 days later beneath the birch tree on the hill, the one he had loved, the one he had painted so many times. The final painting, still resting on his easel, was brought up the hill and placed by the grave before the wind carried it gently into the grass. The painting showed a single fox beneath a tree. Looking skyward, they buried Kira beside him. Some of the villagers thought it strange, but no one objected. It felt right. It felt real. To the final prayer, no one spoke for a long time. Then a child pointed toward the tree. "Look," he whispered. A single leaf fell from the very top of the birch, golden, fluttering, dancing through the air like a memory made weightless. It landed between the two graves, and the wind stilled. Seasons turned, as they always do. Autumn gave way to a pale, gentle winter. Snow came late that year, and when it did, it covered the village softly, as if aware that something had changed. The hill behind Elias's cottage stood quiet and untouched, blanketed in white. The birch tree, bare and skeletal, still reached toward the sky, but now it watched over two simple stone markers nestled beneath its roots. One read, Elias Thorne, painter, husband, keeper of quiet things. 1931-2025. The other, smaller, had no dates. It simply said, Kira, loyal companion. Wild soul. The villagers came from time to time, some with flowers, others with stories. They'd leave offerings at the foot of the graves, a jar of paintbrushes, a scarf, a small loaf of bread, even a single foxglove blossom. People who had never spoken much to Elias in life now found comfort in speaking to him after his passing. Children especially loved the story. The Man and the Fox, they called it. A tale whispered at night of how Elias had once saved a dying animal, and how, in return, she had stayed by his side until the very end. But over time, as people always do, they moved on. The cottage was boarded up. The garden grew wild again. The path leading up the hill faded into the tall grass. The paint on Elias's final canvases cracked and curled like autumn leaves, yet something remained. It began the following autumn. Nearly a year to the day after Elias passed, a farmer walking at dawn claimed he saw something unusual. A fox, lean and red, with a single golden eye, standing beneath the birch tree. It wasn't scared, he said. It didn't run. It simply looked at him for a long moment, then turned and vanished into the mist. He told no one for a week, afraid they'd laugh. But then others began to see it too. A baker's daughter, cutting through the field with her friends, saw a shape dart through the tall grass, a flicker of rust, a flash of gold. A boy, climbing the hill with a sketchbook, said he felt something. Warm brush against his leg. When he turned, nothing was there. Only a fresh set of paw prints in the frost, leading toward the tree. Soon the stories grew. Some believed it was a spirit, others a coincidence. But those who had known Elias, truly known him, believed differently. "It's her," said old Mr. Alwyn, now graying and bent. "It's Kira. She's still watching, still waiting." Every year on the first day of October, the village gathered beneath the birch. No one declared it a holiday, yet people came quietly, naturally, bringing candles, paintings, and scraps of food. They would sit around the tree and tell stories of Elias and Kira, of a man who had lost everything and still found something worth living for, of a fox who had no reason to stay, and yet stayed anyway. They would sit until sunset. And every year, as the sky turned red and gold, a single birch leaf, just one, would drift down from the highest branch. Sometimes a child would catch it. Other times it would fall between the two graves. No one ever saw it fall from the tree. It was just there, suspended in the air, dancing its slow, quiet descent, like a message sent from somewhere just beyond sight. The hill became a quiet place of pilgrimage, not grand, not marked on any map. But those who climbed it often left with something they hadn't brought with them. Peace. Or maybe something gentler. Acceptance. The birch tree remained tall. The wind never howled quite as loud there. And if you sat long enough, still enough, you could swear you heard two soft breaths, one old, one wild, rising and falling. In the silence between the leaves, some say foxes do not bond the way dogs do, that they are too wild, too distant. But there are stories, rare, quiet stories, of bonds so deep they need no words, no leashes, no names, just presence. Just loyalty. This was one of those stories, and as long as the last leaf falls, softly and without sound, it will be remembered.